I believe you studied drama in your younger years at university.
Yeah, I started. I made my theatrical debut when I was about 6, I think, in just starting in school, and I always enjoyed being in plays in school, and then I went ahead and studied drama at the University of Oklahoma. I thought I wanted to be an actor, but in the meantime, I was beginning to learn folk songs and learning a little bit of the guitar, and it wasn't long before that really crowded out any thoughts of acting. Thank goodness, because I don't think I would have been much of a good actor.
The music more or less took over before
absolutely.
Before the acting ambitions.
The music ran away with me.
Right. What first attracted you to folk music?
I'm sorry? What attracted it to?
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's hard to explain, John. I always liked all kinds of music. I grew up in a middle-class home, first in Chicago, and then when we moved down to Oklahoma. And, of course, the radio was the main thing until television came along. But my musical influences were really very media-oriented one. I mean, I heard what everyone else heard, and I liked it. But every now and then I would hear a song that had a special attraction for me. And it turned out that they were what you called folk songs. I didn't know that at the time, but I would hear, you know, Burl Ives sing about the fox who went out on a chilly night. Or I'd hear Shenandoah, or one of these songs, and they were special for me. They went in one special kind of corner of my consciousness. And I think I was kind of alone in that. Not a lot of people in Oklahoma that I knew cared much about that kind of stuff at all. But it just had an extra resonance for me. It was there was the romanticism, I think, of songs that came from a couple hundred years before, and yet were sung by folks just like myself, you know. And there was just that historical kind of perspective that got me as well.
Were there any songwriters in particular that gave you the inspiration to want to have a try at writing your own songs?
Oh, yeah, Woody Guthrie.
Yeah?
Woody Guthrie, for sure. When I started writing songs, I was still at the university, and I'd begun to hear recordings by Woody Guthrie. Now, it turned out that Woody Guthrie was from Okemah, Oklahoma, which was only 25 miles from my town. I used to play high school sports against teams from Okemah, so I was attracted, you know, here was a homeboy who had written these wonderful songs. And the fact that he was writing songs that sounded like folk songs, that were most of the time actually songs written to existing melodies of folk songs, that attracted me. I mean, that was I saw that as a way that I could actually participate in that tradition.
So you were still at university when you began writing?
I wrote my first song in the back row of a Shakespeare lecture at university, and I'm ashamed of myself. I actually loved the Shakespeare lectures. I don't know why I took time off that day, but I wrote one of the 4 or 5 worst songs ever written in the English language that day, and thought it was wonderful. You know, I thought, boy, I got one here, and it was a phony Elizabethan murder ballad that was really awful. Luckily, when you're young, you don't realize how bad your stuff is. You think, God, you know, I wrote it; it must be good. So I wasn't discouraged; I was encouraged, and kept trying. And you know how your friends will lie to you and say, gosh, that's good, you know. Yeah. So I had friends like that, God bless them. And nobody got up and walked out, you know. And so I had enough encouragement to keep trying until finally the first good song I wrote was The Marvelous Toy, and that must have been about the 30th or 40th song over a period of 18 months or so before I actually wrote a good one.
When? Right. So was it about that point of time, do you feel perhaps you began to develop a real confidence in your writing?
That came very shortly after that. I wrote The Marvelous Toy while I was still in the Army. And when I got out, I stumbled into an audition for a replacement for one of the original members of the Chad Mitchell Trio, a very popular group at that point, and I actually won the part provisionally, and I was with them for a week of rehearsal, and it turned out my voice didn't really blend with theirs, so that didn't work out. But their producer and musical director was a man named Milt Oken, and during a rehearsal break, I sang The Marvelous Toy for them, which was the only good one I had at that point, and they loved the song and eventually recorded it. And most importantly, when he had to break the bad news to me that I wasn't going to stay with the trio, Milt told me that he loved the song and he would be interested in hearing any songs that I wrote subsequently. And it's now been 38 years, and Milt and I are still together as partners in music publishing and songwriting. So at that point, I began to get a little confidence because this very important musical figure had told me that he loved a song that I had written and planned to record it and would like to hear anything else I wrote, and that was very encouraging.
I could imagine it would be, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular favourite memories of the folk scene that thrived in places like Greenwich Village in the early 60s?
Well, it was a very exciting time. And, of course, it's strange. You look back and you realize that at the time you didn't know it was a unique time. It was just your time. I mean, you were there, and there were all these coffee houses that were, putting folk music on the stages, and you started getting jobs and working and everything, and being right in the middle of it, you didn't realize that there was anything unique. And it's only with a little perspective that you say, God, that was really something. But things were happening all over the place. Some people were getting, very, very popular and getting. One of my roommates was Paul Stuckey from Peter, Paul and Mary, and they were putting the group together, and it just took off like a rocket, and so that. And then Dylan had just come to town, and he was beginning to catch on very, very big. So, there was always a feeling of, your turn might be next. But maybe not. Maybe your turn, maybe your career would go in a different direction, which mine did. Mine was always more of a gradual growth kind of career rather than anything exploding. But I think some of my favorite memories are working at a place called the Gaslight on McDougal Street in Greenwich Village. It turns out, with perspective, it was the most important venue, I think, in the village. It was there that people like Phil Oakes got their start, and Buffy St. Marie, and actually Bill Cosby, if you can believe that, was one of us. And but you'd have people like Dave Van Ronk and Ramblin' Jack Elliott working there. But most importantly, we also had people like Mississippi John Hurt and Doc Watson playing there. So we, young guys on the bill, would get to hear someone like Doc Watson or John Hurt 3 or 4 times a night for a couple of weeks at a time, and you just can't put a price on that kind of experience.
It must have been a terribly inspiring environment to work in, too, with so many other great...
Well, it was. I mean, when you were hearing the real thing, like Doc, it just gave you a sense of, here is the tradition in person. This is what you're all about. This is what you're trying to emulate, trying to grow with. And there it was, right in your ear, right in your eyes, several times a night. And it was the real thing. And that's tremendously inspiring.
From what I've gathered, speaking to other people who were involved in that scene at the time, there wasn't really a sense of competitiveness between the artists. It was more so a sense of community.
Well, I think it was a kind of a schizoid sort of thing. I think it was both simultaneously. I think at one and the same time, you were competing with one another, but supportive of one another. And it's one of those human kind of things where you can be both. The dichotomy can be there, but you can, be just equal parts of it from moment to moment.
Yeah.
I know certainly there's no way to see one of your colleagues like Bob Dylan shoot up like a skyrocket and not feel envious. Of course, you got to feel envious when it's happening like that. At the same time, I knew and liked Bob a lot, and we hung out, and I knew a lot of his work as it began to shape, so I was supportive of him, and he was supportive of me, and that's the way it was with like Phil Oakes as well. At the same time, you wanted to do as well as you possibly could.
Of course, yeah. A few years down the track, you moved to England for a while in the early 70s, didn't you?
Yeah, we went to England. Midge and I went to England the first time in 1965 as kind of like tourists, but a couple of friends over there had said that they'd see what they could come up with by way of some folk clubs, and when I got over there, I found that my first Elektra album, Ramblin' Boy, was being imported over there and was going around all the clubs, and a lot of them knew the songs, and it turned out there was a tremendous interest in having me come and play in these clubs, and we wound up staying in England for about 6 weeks longer than we had planned to, while I played all these clubs, and I met an agent who was involved in folk music and brought me back about 9 months later for a 6 weeks tour, and it's been like that ever since. And in 1970, I guess it was, we went over and rented a house, or a succession of houses, and stayed for about 3 years, even though we came back to America for the summer, and for Christmas, I guess. We lived over there for about 3 years and really enjoyed it a lot. And then it just seemed to be getting to be too much. The girls were really getting heavily into school, and it was time to decide where we were going to spend all our time, so we came home.
Many of your songs over the years have been covered by other artists. Is there any one cover in particular of one of your songs that holds a special place for you?
Oh, boy, that would be a hard one to answer. There have been many wonderful covers. There must be 200 covers of The Last Thing on My Mind by now. And I don't know, hearing Pete Seeger sing Ramblin' Boy.
Yeah.
That'll do. That'll do very nicely.
That's not a bad one to pick. Yeah.
Yeah. But there are also some I guess it's, the really weird ones that stick with you. There is a recording of I Can't Help But Wonder Where I'm Bound by Tiny Tim that never fails to put me on the floor. And then someone sent me a bootleg 45 RPM recording of The Last Thing on My Mind done as a square dance call. And John, you never heard anything like it in your life. I mean, it's a lesson too late for the learner. Element left in your left hand, swing your partner, made of sand, made of sand, and it goes on like that. It's gruesomely funny.
Has songwriting got any easier for you as the years have passed?
I thought the day would come when it would. I thought, one of these days, I'll really know how to write songs, and then I'll just write and write and write. It'll be easy then, because I'll know how to do it. And in fact, it's like root canal every time.
You're a harsh judge of your own work?
Beg pardon?
Are you a harsh judge of your own work?
I'm a reasonable judge of my own work, but actually my wife is a wonderful judge. She's a really good editor. She's not a songwriter herself, but what she can really hear are the false notes. Not musically, but, lyrically, where I'm losing the thread or something. She's very good at detecting that and getting me back on track. I think I'm one of those who thinks that every writer needs a good editor. Mm-hmm. And that in songwriting, very few of us have them. And we would all do better if we had a really good editor that we could go to with our stuff and say, what do you think? And then listen and work creatively from that. But I'm lucky in that respect. I've got a wonderful editor that I'm married to.
You've written many songs for children over the years as well. Do you tackle the songwriting process any differently when writing these types of songs?
No, you really don't. I think the difference is, I mean, they're just as hard to write. It's just as hard to write a good children's song as it is any kind of song. And I think the differences are really in a matter of the scope of the concept of the song, and the vocabulary are simpler. But you still have the same kinds of problems to solve, of getting a song, an idea out there, and then looking for the surprise that brings a laugh, or looking for the phrases that will stick in the mind, and choruses that will kind of beckon for them to sing with. It's just as hard to do. It's just the topics are simpler, and the vocabulary is simpler. That's all.
Yeah. Just generally, in terms of your writing, have you ever consciously sat down to try and make your ultimate statement, your masterpiece, so to speak?
Oh yeah, the great song.
Yeah.
No, I've given up on that. I don't think you can do that. I think what you do is your body of work, and there will be different songs from that body of work for different people that they might prefer to any of the others. If they prefer anything, they might, this song might be someone's favorite song of yours, and another one might be someone else's. But I don't think you can write, is there a Bob Dylan song? Is there a single towering masterpiece that puts all the other Dylan songs in second place? I don't think so. I think it's the body of work.
It'd be impossible to choose one, really, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. So what you do is you write one song at a time, and you try to write each song as well as you can, and then in the end, it's not for you to judge.
Yeah.
How you've done it. That's for others to do.
Do you think in this day and age that music still has that same power to raise social and political awareness as it did, say, maybe in the early 60s?
I don't have any doubt of it anymore. I do believe very strongly that songs play a strong part in political consciousness. I would just ask anyone to try to imagine the success of the American civil rights movement without "We Shall Overcome."
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you can. The song was such a statement, a simple, direct statement, so empowering that it carried the movement on its shoulders, and I think that song changed American society permanently. And so I think songs definitely, they can't all by themselves do it. People have to do their jobs. But I think that songs can definitely contribute to social change and political change.
Who would be some of the songwriters going around today that have caught your attention?
Well, there's so many. I don't know where to start. Pals of mine like, Guy Clark actually has come down to Oz several times.
Yes, he has.
And I think the guy is, a whiz. Good old Shel Silverstein, a great songwriter. Young songwriters, I hear people like, oh my God, Anita Franco, phenomenal writer.
And here at the moment,
John
actually.
Gorka, Suzanne Vega, wonderful writer. Lucy Kaplansky. It's an endless. I think there's really a golden age right now of people writing great songs.
It does seem to be a great new breed of writers coming through, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Spoke about your children's songs earlier. Tell us about your work.
Not enough of them to sing my songs, John.
Never is,
Sorry,
it?
go ahead.
That's all right. You spoke about your children's songs earlier. What about your work in children's books?
Well, that's one of those kind of things that just comes in, if you're lucky. I got a call back in 1987 from the publisher of Morrow Jr. Books, a man named David Ruther, and he said that he liked my song Jennifer's Rabbit, which I had written for my daughter when she was 3, and wondered if I'd like to have it made as a picture book. And I said, sure. And on my way into New York to talk to him, I had another idea, or I remembered an idea I'd had about 6 months ago before that, about doing Aesop's fables in verse for kids. And he liked that idea, so I did 10 fables in verse, and they printed them, and he said, well, how about some more? So I wound up doing 3 more books of them, and then we turned my song Engelbert the Elephant into a book, and I began to get ideas for books from whole cloth, as it were, until by now I've done about 14, 15 books with them, and there's still more coming out. And it all came from a phone call. I don't know if I would ever have done it if I hadn't had the call inviting me to try.
Yeah. And how does that compare, writing books for children to writing songs for yourself and for your audience?
It's even harder.
Is it really?
Sorry to say. I keep hoping I'll come across something that's easier, but writing books for kids is even harder than writing songs, because you write songs, the fact that you're singing it, you can phrase a line so that it'll go smoothly, but it's all in how you phrase it vocally and everything, whereas when it's on the printed page, it just has to be right. The phrasing has to be exactly right, as a matter of fact, and they all like me up at Morrow Jr. Books, but they're very, very tough when it comes to standards and judging and editing and critiquing, and I'm used to getting things sent back to me, 15 times before we get it right.
Goodness me. Which would never happen in songwriting.
Oh, it's murder. Oh. But, on the other hand, comes the day when you hold a book in your hands that you wrote, and that's kind of an amazing feeling.
Tell us about the extent of your touring these days and your live work.
I'm trying to cut down on it, and indeed this is going to be the first year since 1965, I think, that I won't do a tour in the UK. I might just go over and do 2 or 3 dates this fall, but no touring. I'm just cutting that down now, and there's a whole bunch of venues in the States that I'm not going to anymore, even though, I love them all. But it's time to do less traveling and time to stay home and write and record and, above all, see my family and my grandson. Yeah. I have a grandson, Christopher, who will be 3 in April, and I can't tell you what a joy that is to see him all the time.
You still get the same thrill, though, from playing live as, say, in the past?
Do I still what?
Get the same thrill and enjoyment from playing live as, say...
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I still love to perform.
Just the traveling.
I'm still, as big a ham as I ever was. And I still love the music. And I always play with guys where I go. For example, when I come down to Oz, Al Ward from Katoomba played with me on the whole last tour, and what a joy that was. I mean, he's such a great player, and that's always a thrill for me to play with really great musicians.
Any chance we'll see you down here again in the near future?
Definitely.
Terrific.
Definitely. For example, I'd love to play Port Fairy again. I mean, that must have just happened.
Yes. Just has this weekend.
Kathy Fink and Marcy Marks are down there, and they played Port Fairy this year, and they're doing a tour. They are there now as we speak.
That's right.
And we live just like 45 minutes from them and see them pretty often. And yeah, I'd love to come back down to Oz. I love it down there.
Oh, we'll look forward to that.
You guys are good.
Oh, we love our music. No doubt about that. You seem to command an extremely loyal following. You must consider your relationship with your fans to be something particularly special.
I think it is. I think that's one part of this kind of music. However, having said that, it's probably the same for most kinds of music. I imagine that country music fans are, they're equally loyal. But there's a personal feeling, I think, to things like country and folk. People know, not just suspect, but they know that it's their story that's being told and sung. It's their music. So no wonder they make like personal connections with the musicians.
How would you describe a typical Tom Paxton audience?
Well, they're older now, John. You see a little more salt and pepper out there than you used to years ago. But there's also, more and more young people are coming. Although, to be honest, the young people mainly go to hear young artists, and that's the way that ought to be.
Yeah.
But now and then, they come to see what the old guy's doing. But I think that the typical audience is probably university educated and middle class, and with pretty broad tastes that include this music.
Yeah. Did any of your children grow up to be musically inclined at all?
I'm sorry?
Did any of your children grow up to be musically inclined at all?
Well, they both love music, and they did the piano lessons and all that. But Jennifer is becoming a history professor, and Kate is working in public relations. So neither one of them ever had any real inclination to try to do music as a profession.
Mm-hmm.
I think they saw me getting up to catch too many early planes, and said, well, there's a better way.
This is not for us.
Right.
If a young songwriter just starting out came to you for advice and you only had time to give them one piece of advice, what do you think it would be?
Only one piece of advice, huh?
Yeah.
I would say go where the songwriters are.
Mm-hmm.
Go where the songwriters are and learn from other songwriters. Measure yourself against other songwriters and grow with other songwriters. But go where the songwriters are.
Draw your inspirations.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not just inspiration, but support, camaraderie, learning, stealing licks, whatever.
Yeah.
But go where it's happening.
Any regrets at all, Tom? Anything you'd go back and change given the chance?
Oh, I can't imagine any of it. I mean, that stupid song My Way about, regrets, I've got a few, but then again, too few to mention. I got too many regrets to mention. And, where do I begin?
Yeah.
I think I've made a lot of mistakes, and more or less costly ones, but in the end, you have to say, well, all things considered, I've been incredibly lucky. But I would change a whole lot of things if I had it to do over, but I think anyone would.
Yeah. And there isn't much you can do about it now anyway. So
no, there's zilch that you can do about it.
No point dwelling.
No.
What's on your books for the rest of '98? What are your plans?
Well, I'm doing a bunch of festivals this year, and I'm also doing several different stints teaching songwriting.
Oh, really?
And I really find that I love that. I love working with young songwriters or beginning songwriters and helping them get their first good song out. I love doing that, and I'll be doing it in about 3 or 4 different locations this year, and I look forward to that. But I want to record another regular album this year if I can, and I'm also thinking of doing an album of old material that I still like to do, and which I haven't re-recorded to death. Maybe in Ireland.
Oh, yeah. That's terrific.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
And I'd also like to do another children's album this year if I could. So I've got plenty to do.
Just going back to
and
sorry,
working on an orchestral piece of the Aesop's Fables with a friend of mine named Paul Reisler, who founded the group Trapezoid, and we were actually working on that when the phone rang.
All right.
No idea when that's going to be finished. It's a real stretch to do something like this, and we're just feeling our way along.
Oh, certainly a lot to keep you busy for the rest of the year, that's for sure.
God knows. Yeah.
Just going back to
tired to talk about it.
To your the teaching of songwriting that you're doing, do you find that helps sharpen up your own skills as well, teaching others?
Well, it does. You know, they say the best way to learn something is to teach it. And it forces me to examine some of the kind of presumptions that I've had along the way about the way it's done. You know, I find it, listening to my students and reacting to them, that I learn different ways. They might be just beginning a different approach, but I can see that it's a valid approach. So yeah, it does help to sharpen your own skills to try to teach.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Tom, look, I won't hold you up any longer. I'll let you get back to work there. I think I can hear a guitar sort of faintly in the background.
Yes.
It sounds like you're in the middle of something.
But it's great talking to you.
And to you too. It's been a pleasure. And let's hope we get the chance to see you down here in the near future.
I hope so too. And when I get to Melbourne, let's do another talk.
Lovely. Maybe you'll dig out that old Elizabethan murder ballad for us.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Tom.
You're very welcome.
All the best. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.